Hello, I'm David Hunt. My guest today is a power player in our community. He's a political and social activist, an animal, I would actually say. I'm talking about David Macca McCarthy. Hello.
G'day, David. An animal?
Oh, it's definitely an animal, but in the nicest way possible, of course. You're a lawyer, a freelance journalist, which was mostly in, like with motoring, journalism. You were a spokesman for Mercedes Benz Australia for more than a decade. You are a legend on Saturday Magazine on Joy 94.9. You're a Joy board member and president and life member as well. So that's just a tip of the iceberg. But let's go back. What were you like as a kid?
A brat.
A brat.
Precocious.
The animal.
An animal. I was always taught by my parents a couple of basic values.
Are they alive still?
They're not, unfortunately. If you have more than what you need, keep a little bit aside, but share it. Mm-hmm. And that unless you want to be discriminated against, then don't discriminate. Everyone is a human being and they all deserve to be treated with dignity. Yep. And that was, what my parents drummed into me from a very, very early age.
How lovely.
And, I came from my parents were, that wonderful term, well-to-do. Yep. But they were hard-working people.
Whereabouts?
In Warrigal, so in Gippsland.
Right.
My dad was an engineer, mechanical engineer, and he had a number of businesses. My mother was a Miss Australia judge.
Okay.
And she knew a lot of people in the entertainment industry. Yeah. So there was often a lot of family around the house. I remember people, like Graham Kennedy and Frank Wilson and. Oh, awesome. And of course this is in the 60s. Yeah. When television was incredibly powerful. Yeah. But they taught me those values, and that you need to, if something's not right, you need to speak up, and if you believe in something, you need to stand up for it.
Yeah. When did you realise that you might have been gay?
When I was 4.
4?
Yeah.
Whoa. And that would have been back in the dark ages.
It was just after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So therefore, that awareness, how did you work it out?
I was attracted to other boys, but not in a sexual way, because I was 4 years old. Yep. But I just knew that I wanted to have more relationships with men rather than with women, with girls. Yep. And that was the natural, for me that was the natural thing. I came out when I was 14, which was 1972. Yeah. And my parents were incredibly supportive. They actually said, yes, we knew. Why did it take you so long? Okay. But they were very progressive. Yeah, well, they would have been. For the time. Even now, telling, for a lot of 14-year-olds, telling their parents that they're gay is a major thing.
How did you go at school on that front?
I found actually being out was a strength.
Okay. You
weren't
bullied?
A couple tried. I was a bit of a straight basher.
Okay.
So I would stand up for myself. Schools are an interesting environment. I think whilst they've probably changed a lot, at the end of the day, bullies are always a central point of any school or any community. And you need to stand up for yourself. My father actually taught me to box.
Okay. Oh, that's handy.
And he basically said, look, force of argument is always good, but if that fails, knock them out. So.
When did you have your first affair?
Or my first sexual experience? Oh, God. And
was it just, did it naturally happen, or was it just a funny situation?
Oh, look, all these things, we all scheme around them. Yeah. I think probably 9 or 10.
Whoa.
But it was probably the early teens where it then developed a little bit further. Because, I was always aware of it. And, boys particularly, I think, there's a little bit of experimentation goes on, probably more than girls, but that's not an area I'm an expert in, obviously. Right. Yeah. And it developed certainly more in my teens. By the time I'd reached the age of majority, 18, I was I was well experienced.
Well,
I was an old hand at it, you might say.
Oy, boom, boom. So law, why?
Yes. Look, my father actually wanted me to go into the business, the engineering business.
Yeah.
Whilst I had an abiding interest in cars and engines and automobiles, I didn't think that running a business would actually be my expertise. So I discussed it with him and he was quite disappointed. So he subsequently sold the business. My mother thought, be a doctor, be a lawyer, you'll always have a job, be an accountant, you'll always have a job. So I did it, but I didn't actually finish my degree. We had a family illness that was pretty serious. So the last semester I wasn't there. So even to this day, I should go back and do that.
Or do you feel the urge you want to get that degree?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Okay.
It'd be nice.
But do you need it?
No, look, it certainly informed me over my life.
Yeah.
And I do keep up to date with current laws and statute.
Yeah.
And it's a very handy thing to know, but particularly as a journalist as well, and also when I was working at Mercedes, in communications, knowing what you can say, and I don't just mean in terms of the company's reputation, but in terms of taking a position with regards to a regulation or a government decision or a customer, knowing what the law is actually about was very helpful.
How did you fall into journalism? Was it, because lawyers are often comedians, like public speakers, or like journalism? A lot of lawyers are journalists.
Look, it's a little bit of gay history. I was actually CEO of People Living with HIV/AIDS, which its successor is Living Positive. And a very good friend of mine, Andrew Kosh, he had bought or started MCV when the gay press at that time went broke.
Yep.
Mainly as a result of a guy called Greg Fisher, the Satellite Group, and they'd bought up all these papers, but the whole thing went wrong. So Andrew and his partner Keith, they started MCV, and Andrew said to me, you're pretty good with words, Macca. You're a great writer. You understand the power of words, and you love cars. How about you do a motoring column for MCV? So I did. Now the challenge was, this is a long time ago. This is, 25 years or more. That actually getting test cars from the car manufacturers was really difficult. So I would use the argument that if they didn't give me cars, they were homophobic.
And that worked?
Well, it did.
Yeah.
But there was only one gay motoring writer at the time who was sort of out. And, it was a very blokey industry.
Could imagine it would be.
And, look, it still is to a lot of the extent.
Yep.
Although one might say that we're well represented now in that industry.
Good.
But I loved it, because I loved cars. I loved writing about it. I was guilty of one particular headline, and it was in MCV, and it was about the Falcon XR6 Turbo, which you probably won't know what that is.
I know the word Falcon.
But
that's the only part I knew.
It was probably one of the greatest cars Australia had made in terms of its engineering. Turbocharged engine, I know. But the headline was Big Blow for Big Go, subheadline, pulls like a 16-year-old. And I got into some serious...
I could imagine you would have met...
Yeah, but 16-year-old was the age of consent.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and the CEO in Australia Ford at the time, Jeff Polites, he was appalled. Now remember, they were Midsumma sponsors as well, which I'd got them on board with Midsumma.
Okay.
And he was appalled, and then I just said to him, yeah, okay, it's probably not the best comment, but I said, think of the coverage.
Yes. And
think of the share of voice you were getting, mate. People remember me for that.
Of course, and and that's what journalism is about. And some of those headlines, you read the headline and you go, I've got to read this, otherwise you just skim over.
So, this was before it was sort of online, even though some of it was. So now to be classified as clickbait.
Yep.
And the headline just came to me, I thought I ran that, and the article got subbed, but no one changed it.
Yeah. You became part of Joy.
Yes.
And you're like, were you part of the motor show? as well. There was a motoring
Talking
show.
Cars.
Talking Cars?
Yeah, so there's been a number of motoring shows on Joy, and it actually started with Damien Nicholas.
Right, okay.
Many, many years ago, and I would do a segment. It was often, I think, on a Thursday.
Right.
It'd be a 10 or 15 minute segment, and I'd just come in and talk, and then ultimately it developed into its own show, which was in the evening.
Yep.
And the great thing is it opened so many doors for Joy, and also for the industry, because the CEOs and others would come in and we'd have a chat, so they could actually speak to our community. A number of them, like Ford was a Midsumma sponsor for many years, made that happen. Volkswagen, with Queer Film, and a whole lot of other car companies at different times. So they actually learnt to engage with our community, and that was really encouraging. But it was great for Joy as well, because again, we were reaching an audience. People think our community are not interested in cars, and I know you're not. And that's fine. But a lot of people are. Girls and boys,
agree. And we get pigeonholed far too often.
We do.
I thought it was wonderful. And just a little throwaway here. My nephew, because I would often have the radio on Joy, and he would would be in his car when I first moved back to Melbourne, and he would say, "There's this car show, I love it," and he would actually go out for a drive in the car
to listen to it,
to listen to the car show, and would come back and say it was really fun but informative at the same time. You then got involved in the board of Joy, and you've been in and out of it a few times.
Yeah, look, I came onto the board, and I'm just trying to think, David, what year it was. We might need to look that up, but I came on and I was on for a year. Then after the AGM, I was elected president, and I was president for. And
we had to curtsy when you walked into
That's
the
right.
room.
Yeah, well, I tried to get people to do it, but they wouldn't. But I think it was for 3 years. Then I had a break. Then I came back and did another term.
All this time you were at Mercedes.
I was
in this really vital, important job for
and it was
their company.
It was a full-on job, and the company, they knew when they employed me, they knew that I was on air at Joy, and they were fine with that.
Great.
Company was fully supportive. A lot of companies talk about diversity and inclusion, but I can tell you, Mercedes Benz, in the German social democratic model, they really actually do believe in diversity and engagement.
And that would have been back in the era where it wasn't so much a mandate now.
Yeah,
it wasn't there.
This was 2006.
Yep.
And so they were happy for me to do that, and being president of Joy also, they accepted, took up a lot of time, and they supported that.
Yep.
So, often, and look, I'm not an apologist for them. The company's not perfect, but they supported what I was doing, and many companies wouldn't have allowed you to do that. And it used to take up at least a day a week, and they knew that.
Yep.
So being president, that was there were a lot of challenges there. Joy is always challenged.
Always. Now, I just want your thoughts. Joy's there. Marriage equality's through. A lot of people have said, we don't need that voice anymore. All of a sudden, there's this little guy out there that's a rugby player that all of a sudden has caused such a sensation and dividing the country. Even a conversation on the tram last night that I had an argument with a 23-year-old about it. It's really now that we need a voice more than ever, don't we?
We do. I'm not a defender of Israel Folau. He has his beliefs, and I understand that, and I respect them. But those beliefs are acquired, right? Despite what he may think, he wasn't born with them. It's not in his genetics. It's not in his DNA. And a lot of the things that he's criticising and a lot of things he's talking about, and I think sometimes it's taken a bit out of context. His message, I think, for him is simple. The problem is, that's his belief, and he's entitled to that belief. But the other thing my parents said to me is, do no harm. And it is doing harm. It's not about freedom of speech. It's not about freedom of religion.
And it's actually, if a religious person shouldn't talk hate like that.
Well, we are God's work.
Yep.
So I think the role that Joy plays in this, just as we did in marriage equality, is hugely important. And, we need to stand up for what we believe in. And remember, this religious freedoms argument, we are the ones in the crosshairs. Right? No one else. It's us. And just as we're in the crosshairs over marriage equality, and the Australian people supported marriage equality. It's not about same-sex marriage, it's about marriage equality.
Yep.
Regardless
human
of...
rights issue.
Yeah, and it's about gender.
Yep.
And, you know, the Australian community supported us. I think religious freedoms, the fight is going to be a little bit more difficult. But I say this to the Prime Minister. If you really believe this is a defining issue and this is an issue that divides Australia, and all those things that you said about marriage equality, have a plebiscite, mate. Have another postal survey. Australia Post could do with the money, but have another plebiscite.
Yeah.
If you actually believe that this is an issue for Australians, have a vote on it, and I think you might be surprised. Most Australians respect people's right to religion, but they want separation of church and state, despite what a lot of Christian promoters talk about, you know, what serious church people talk about. They need to understand where God's work. The fact that that's inconvenient for them, and they need to get their own house in order first. But you know, this is a battle. This is a serious battle, and it's about us. It's not about religious freedom. It's about the people that didn't think we should be allowed to be married, that never thought homosexuality should be decriminalised. They actually want to turn back the clock. They want us to go back in our little box.
Which that's what they're doing in Russia right now.
Yeah, and you know, over many years where I've, you know, advocated and agitated for our community, the worst thing that can happen, David, is when you're at the barrier and you're up there and you're advocating and you're fighting, you know, for your rights, and you look behind you and there's no one there. You know, our community, we coalesce together on marriage equality, and we need to do it on religious freedom. We need to stand our ground, because otherwise we'll get done over.
We will. Because you can't help yourself. You've now just gone back on the Joy board, is
I
that
have,
right?
yep. And look, joy is very important to me. I enjoy joy. I enjoy the radio. I enjoy the engagement. But you know, it is so important to our community. I often say on air, just imagine if you turned the radio on and Joy wasn't there. Imagine if you turned the television on and Channel 31 wasn't there. Right? You know, free-to-air TV, with respect, is crap. It's dreadful. And commercial radio, with some exceptions, is dreadful. But this is about our community. So I've gone back in because, you know, Joy, there's lots of things happening in the next 12 to 24 months. There'll be the move to the Pride Centre. It's getting the funding for that. It's making it happen. It's engaging our community about, you know, doing it, and making sure that that move is as seamless as possible. But Joy, it is always about survival. And, you know, there's never enough money. It does keep us on our toes, but because I've sort of retired, well, I haven't, but I've got some time. And, you know, so I was co-opted back onto the board. I'll be up at the AGM in October, I think it will be. So I'll stand to be elected. But I'm looking forward to it, you know. I've had a break of a few years from it.
We need you back on that board, and a few other community groups as well. Thank you, Matt. We could talk
We run out of time.
We've run out of time. Overtime. Overtime. Macca, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'm David Hunt, and you'll see me again real soon.